No one noticed her at first. She slid into seat 11A on flight 227 like a shadow, folding her hands neatly in her lap, eyes scanning the cabin with sharp precision that made the flight attendants uneasy. Her jacket was worn but well kept, the faded navy fabric hinting at a life once disciplined, once extraordinary. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't smile beyond the faintest tilt of her lips, and her gaze had a depth that unsettled anyone who tried to meet it. As the plane taxied down the runway at O'Hare International Airport, the hum of engines filled the cabin. Passengers were absorbed in screens and books, earbuds in place, headphones over their heads drowning out the world. Some chatted quietly, others stared out the small oval windows, watching the city lights fade into darkness. Only the flight attendants occasionally glanced her way, exchanging brief, whispered comments. "She looks serious," one whispered, arranging drink carts. "She looks like she's on a mission," another said, eyes narrowing. Her name on the manifest was Anna Fletcher, a name that, if anyone looked it up, would come up in faded news articles about a young Air Force pilot who vanished mysteriously in 1983. Anna Fletcher, missing, presumed dead, erased from public life. Few knew that she had survived, had been forced to live under the radar, carrying a secret that could topple powerful institutions. Now, 42 years later, she was returning to the air, her past about to intersect with the present in a way no one on the plane could imagine. Anna's gaze wandered to the young girl across the aisle, fiddling nervously with a necklace. She remembered herself at that age, eager to prove she belonged, yet trapped by circumstances beyond control. Her chest tightened. Memories flooded the missions she flew, the secrets she kept, the night everything went wrong, the orders to vanish and disappear. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was a lifetime of exile, of knowing the world believed she was gone, and that any misstep could end her existence for real. The flight attendants began their safety demonstrations, and Anna's mind briefly tuned in. Hand gestures, exit locations, oxygen masks standard. But her eyes were calculating, measuring distances, assessing the plane, memorizing the controls. Not out of habit, but instinct. Every muscle in her body hummed with readiness, honed over decades she was forced to forget she had. The engines roared louder as the plane lifted off the tarmac. The cabin tilted slightly, the city lights stretching into lines across the windows. A young man laughed at a movie clip on his tablet. The woman across the aisle whispered to her companion. A baby cried, and the air filled with the low hum of panic mixed with casual boredom. Then the intercom crackled. The captain's voice sounded tight, strained, as if he was struggling to maintain composure. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've encountered minor turbulence." But the voice faltered. There was a heavy thudding sound in the background, muffled yet unmistakable. Then silence. The passengers murmured, unsure whether to be alarmed. Flight attendants glanced at each other nervously. Anna's eyes snapped to the cockpit door. Something wasn't right. Minutes passed, but the comms didn't resume. She could feel the tension growing like static electricity in the air. Her instincts screamed. Something was happening behind that locked door, something dangerous. She could almost feel the pulse of the plane, the way it shuddered subtly, responding to unseen hands or perhaps no hands at all. A flight attendant approached the cockpit, knocking and calling out. No answer. The door remained sealed. The young girl from across the aisle looked up at Anna, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Anna gave a subtle nod, a reassurance she barely felt herself, but inside her heart raced. The passengers' murmurs escalated into chatter, uncertainty creeping into every corner of the cabin. Some pressed their faces against the windows, seeking comfort in the night sky. Others fiddled with phones, trying to contact anyone who could tell them what was happening. Anna closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself. Memories she had buried for decades surfaced violently, the missions in classified airspace, the sudden orders to vanish, the faces of comrades who never returned, the cold, empty feeling of survival without acknowledgement. She drew in a breath. The intercom crackled again, just once with the captain's voice faint, strained, almost unrecognizable. "I can't breathe." A collective gasp swept through the cabin. The reality hit every passenger at once. The plane was in trouble, real trouble. Anna's hands clenched into fists on her lap. Years of training, years of exile, years of survival flashed before her eyes. She knew what had to be done, but the thought of stepping forward, revealing herself after all these years, sent a shiver down her spine. The first flight attendant turned to the passengers, her voice trembling. "Is there anyone who knows how to fly this plane?" A hush fell over the cabin. All eyes turned to Anna. For the first time in decades, she spoke, her voice calm but authoritative, cutting through the growing panic. "I can." Heads turned, disbelief etched on every face. She could see the questions forming. Who is this woman? Why is she saying this? Is this even possible? Anna stood slowly, letting the weight of her presence fill the aisle. She approached the cockpit door, each step deliberate, measured, echoing in the tense silence. Her heart pounded, but not with fear, with anticipation, with the steel of someone who had been preparing for this moment in secret her entire life. The door wouldn't budge, locked. She pressed her palm against the metal, feeling the cold vibration beneath her fingers, the subtle tremors of the plane as it began to dip slightly. She knew every second counted. The passengers were staring, some frozen in terror, others whispering frantic prayers. Anna's mind raced. She remembered every code, every drill, every trick she had ever learned, not as a civilian, not as a ghost, but as a pilot who had once been entrusted with the impossible. She could get this plane under control. She had to. Then the first officer stumbled from the cockpit, clutching his chest, his face pale and twisted in shock. "Captain can't breathe." His voice was barely audible before he collapsed into the aisle. Anna froze for half a heartbeat, then sprang into action. She pressed herself against the cockpit door, keys and codes flashing through her mind. Every instinct she had honed since 1983 surged through her like electricity. She would not fail, not now. And then, as she reached for the emergency access panel, the plane shuddered violently, pitching downward slightly. A sharp cry went up from the cabin. The oxygen masks dropped, swinging in the sudden turbulence like yellow pendulums of doom. Anna's jaw tightened. Her fingers flew over the keypad. This was no longer a flight. This was a fight, and the fight had only just begun. The first officer's body lay slumped across the aisle, a pale and lifeless reminder of what was happening behind the cockpit door. Passengers gasped and froze, gripping armrests, clutching hands, whispering frantic prayers. The air was thick with panic, a storm of fear swirling inside the cabin. Anna Fletcher stood over the man, her mind racing. She was no stranger to chaos, but this was unprecedented. The flight attendants glanced at each other, eyes wide, voices trembling. Anyone who can fly this plane." One stammered into the microphone. The words echoed across the cabin, hanging in the air like a challenge no one dared to meet. Heads turned toward Anna. Some passengers stared in disbelief, others with hope. All were silent, waiting for anyone to step forward. Anna's throat was dry, her pulse pounding in her ears. Memories surged from decades ago, the missions, the adrenaline, the cold, unyielding cockpit lights of F-4 Phantoms and F-15s, the smell of jet fuel, the tension of high-altitude aerial maneuvers. She drew a deep breath, exhaling slowly, feeling the steel in her veins awaken. "I can," she said, her voice calm and sharp, carrying authority that silenced whispers around her. Eyes widened. A middle-aged man muttered, "No way, Shika," but Anna didn't respond. There was no time. Passengers began to murmur, a mix of skepticism and fear. Flight attendants hesitated, unsure whether to allow her access. Anna stepped forward, feeling the weight of every gaze on her, every expectation, every fear. She reached the cockpit door and pressed her palm against the cool metal, her fingers searching for the emergency override. The door resisted, locked. She felt the vibrations from the plane, a subtle tremor that hinted at instability. Her heart hammered. She knew every second counted. The intercom crackled faintly, the captain's voice weak, almost a whisper. "Help, please, anyone." Anna's jaw tightened. She was the only one who could act. Her fingers flew over the keypad, punching in codes that had been drilled into her decades ago. The lock disengaged with a soft click, and the cockpit door slid open. The cabin gasped collectively, as if witnessing a miracle. Anna stepped inside. Inside, the cockpit was chaos. The captain lay slumped in his seat, oxygen mask half displaced. Warning lights flashed in crimson and amber, alarms blaring intermittently. The first officer's seat was empty, the man collapsed outside. The plane's nose was dipping dangerously, wings slightly angled, speed fluctuating. Anna's eyes scanned the instruments instinctively. Hydraulics stable, altimeter dropping, heading off by 3 degrees. She muttered under her breath. Every reading was a puzzle piece she had to solve immediately. The plane shuddered as turbulence hit hard, jolting her forward. Passengers' cries filtered through the thin cockpit wall. A mother clutched her child, whispering reassurances, though her own fear was palpable. Anna felt a surge of protectiveness. These people had done nothing to deserve death in the sky, and she was the only one who could save them. She keyed the radio, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is Captain Anna Fletcher declaring an emergency. Cockpit incapacitated. Request immediate assistance." Silence. The static crackled, then a tense voice responded. "Flight 227, your call sign, that's impossible. We have no record of you." Anna's heart skipped. She realized that her identity, long buried, erased, classified, had already caused ripples through the airwaves. The controllers didn't recognize her. They wouldn't help. Her fingers danced over the yoke, feeling the old rhythm of controlling an aircraft. Muscle memory kicked in. The engines were responsive, but the plane was heavy, its descent accelerating slightly. She leveled the nose, correcting the pitch by mere inches, her body rigid, her mind sharp. Suddenly, another warning, rapid decompression alert. Oxygen levels dropped, and passengers gasped as the masks fell further from the ceiling. Anna's chest tightened as she assessed the emergency. The pressure differential could cause structural failure. She needed to stabilize altitude fast. She glanced at the captain. He was unconscious, skin pale, breathing shallow. "You're not done yet, old friend," she muttered under her breath. She adjusted the throttle, gaining minimal lift, steadying the plane just enough to prevent a catastrophic dive. Outside, night had fallen completely. The city lights were distant now, small pinpricks against the darkness. Anna could feel the isolation, the way the plane floated suspended in a vast void. Every movement, every correction mattered. One misstep could turn 300 lives into statistics. The cabin's tension was palpable. Passengers clung to seats, whispers of fear turning into prayers and sobs. Anna could hear their hearts pounding, the panic feeding the urgency of her task. She reminded herself she had faced worse. Enemy fire, hostile skis, near-death experiences in war zones. But this was different, no escape hatch, no backup team. She was alone with the lives of strangers in her hands. Her mind flicked back to 1983. She had been a top-tier pilot, assigned to a covert mission nobody could talk about, a mission that went catastrophically wrong. They had told her to vanish, disappear into the shadows, never surface again. She had obeyed, living a ghost life for decades. And now, fate had thrown her into another impossible situation, proving she was alive, proving she could still fly, proving that the world's perception of her death was a lie. The plane jolted again, turbulence ripping through it like an invisible fist. A loud metallic groan echoed from the fuselage. Anna gritted her teeth, hands tightening around the controls. She had to act fast. She keyed the intercom. "Remain calm, I am getting us through this, trust me." A young boy's voice called out from the cabin, trembling. "Are we going to crash?" Anna's throat tightened. "Not if I can help it," she said, voice steady, almost reassuring. She glanced at the yoke and instruments, calculating adjustments, corrections, and speed. She could feel the plane's mood, its subtle shifts, the way it leaned into each turbulence. Years of training came alive, instincts overriding fear. The oxygen masks had almost run their course. Cabin pressure continued to fluctuate. Every second of delay increased the risk of hypoxia. Anna's mind was racing. She needed to get the plane to a safe altitude fast. She engaged the autopilot to stabilize pitch, but she kept manual control on throttle. It was a delicate dance of technology and skill, of instinct and training. Then came a new panic, a warning light for engine temperature. One engine was overheating, threatening to fail. Anna's eyes flicked to the instruments. They were already too close to the Atlantic, the only diversion airports miles away. She had to make a choice, risk a perilous flight to New York, or attempt an emergency landing somewhere unknown. Passengers' cries grew louder. Flight attendants clutched each other, whispering frantic encouragement. Anna's heart pounded, but a cold clarity settled over her. She was in command. She had been trained for this, and no one else could do it. A loud groan echoed from the cockpit as the captain shifted slightly, unconscious, nearly toppling. Anna steadied him with a knee, keeping him from slipping off his seat. She muttered a terse command to herself: focus, control, survive. She keyed the radio again, this time on a different frequency, hoping anyone could hear her. Static hissed, then a military voice cut in sharply. "Flight 227, identify yourself immediately. Your call sign is classified. Explain your presence." Anna froze, the voice recognized her. They knew who she was. 42 years buried, 42 years erased, and now in one breath it had all returned. The plane shuddered violently. Instruments flashed red. The cabin screamed in fear and confusion. Anna's jaw set. She could feel history colliding with the present, old secrets clashing with immediate survival. She knew one thing with certainty. She could get them through this if she dared to push, if she dared to defy orders, if she dared to step out of the shadows and reclaim the skills everyone thought were gone. The intercom crackled faintly again. "Is there anyone who can fly this plane?" Anna's hand hovered over the yoke. She took a deep breath. "I can," she said again, louder this time, with the resolve of someone who had spent a lifetime preparing for a single moment. And with that, she stepped fully into the cockpit, into the role she had been born for, a role the world had tried to erase, a role that would now determine the fate of everyone on Flight 227. Anna Fletcher's fingers gripped the yoke as the cabin's chaos roared behind her. The plane dipped again, turbulence shaking it like a rag doll. Her eyes scanned the cockpit, absorbing every warning light, every fluctuating gauge. The captain remained slumped, his breath shallow, barely audible over the alarms. The first officer was out cold, sprawled across the aisle. Anna's chest tightened, not with fear but with the weight of responsibility. 300 lives depended on her now, and there was no margin for error. Her pulse surged as muscle memory took over. She had been trained for high-speed maneuvers, for split-second decisions at altitudes where mistakes were fatal. But this wasn't a fighter jet. This was a commercial airliner, a machine built for transport, not agility. Its size and inertia were obstacles she would have to overcome. The plane dipped again, alarms screaming, as if warning her of the impossible task ahead. Anna's mind flashed back decades. Tonight she had tried to vanish for good. The secret mission that had gone wrong, the explosion over international waters, the orders that had come after, disappear. No contact. Erase yourself from existence. For 42 years she had obeyed. She had lived as a ghost. And now here she was, stepping into a cockpit where her name had been long classified, where the world believed she was dead. She took a deep breath, letting her fingers dance over the yoke with precision. "Stabilize. Level. Altitude," she muttered. a mantra learned in countless hours of flying high-performance aircraft. The plane shuddered, then slowly responded. The nose leveled slightly, just enough to give her room to breathe, just enough to reassure herself she could hold it together. She keyed the radio, hopping for a response from air traffic control, from anyone who could assist. Static hissed back at her. "This is Flight 227 declaring an emergency. Cockpit incapacitated. I am taking control. Request immediate assistance." Then the voice came, faint at first but unmistakable. "Flight 227, your call sign Night Sparrow. Impossible. We have no record of you being alive." Anna's heart skipped. Recognition. After all these years, someone knew who she was. The U.S. military knew. The people who had ordered her disappearance knew. And now they were listening, waiting, calculating. She ignored the panic creeping at the edges of her mind. There was no time to dwell on what they thought. Her focus had to remain on the plane, on the lives in the cabin, on the hundreds of souls depending on her. Outside, the night sky was a black canvas streaked with the lights of distant cities, unaware of the drama unfolding above. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the jagged clouds that loomed ahead. The storm was coming, and with it, an added layer of danger. She had to navigate through the turbulence, through the storm, through the shadow of a past that refused to stay buried. Her hands moved instinctively over the controls. She engaged the autopilot to maintain a stable heading but kept manual control over throttle and pitch. The plane responded, slowly regaining composure, yet still unstable. Every adjustment had to be precise. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the descent could become fatal. The oxygen masks hung like yellow ghosts from the ceiling. The passengers were pale, gripping their seats, whispering prayers and sobbing quietly. Anna glanced at the young boy across the aisle, his wide eyes glued to her, seeking reassurance. She offered a faint nod, a gesture of calm she barely felt herself. "Don't panic, trust me. I've done this before," she thought. A metallic groan echoed through the fuselage as the engine strained under the altered flight path. Anna realized the plane's right engine was overheating. Another layer of danger, another obstacle. She quickly adjusted the throttle, balancing power between engines, praying the mechanical strain wouldn't lead to failure. The cockpit intercom crackled again, faint but distinct. "Captain Fletcher, you are classified. Explain your presence immediately." Her jaw tightened. The military knew. 42 years of secrecy, of living as a phantom, and they had discovered her existence. Her past was colliding violently with the present, but there was no time for reflection. Survival was immediate. Action was mandatory. She pressed forward, adjusting flaps, monitoring the speed, leveling the wings. The plane began to respond, slowly regaining altitude. The immediate danger lessened, but only slightly. There was still a storm ahead, and fuel levels were a concern. She calculated quickly. They could reach New York, but only with precision and speed. Any delay, any miscalculation could spell disaster. Her mind flicked back to the mission she had been on in 1983, a classified operation in hostile skies. She had faced enemy fire, severe turbulence, near-death encounters, but nothing compared to the weight of responsibility she felt now. She was not only saving herself, she was saving 300 strangers, her former crewmates, the cabin crew, the terrified passengers. She checked the instruments again. Altitude steady, speed slightly high, turbulence severe but manageable, oxygen levels stable, cabin pressure holding. But the alarms kept blaring, a relentless reminder of danger. A young woman in the cabin began sobbing, whispering to her child. Anna's mind flicked briefly to the countless young lives she had sworn to protect during her military service. The instinct to protect, to save, surged within her like electricity. She could not fail, not now. The plane shuddered again, turbulence ripping through it like a physical blow. Anna's hands moved with grace, precision honed over decades. Each correction, each adjustment, a dance between life and death. Then came the voice over the radio again, urgent, clipped. Flight 227, Night Sparrow, you are in restricted airspace. Divert immediately. Lethal force authorized if non-compliant. Anna froze for a heartbeat. Recognition and danger collided in an instant. They were not only aware of her presence, they were prepared to destroy the plane if she disobeyed. Her pulse surged, adrenaline flooding her veins. She glanced at the cabin, at the terrified faces, at the innocent passengers. There was no choice. She would defy them. Her hands tightened around the yoke. "Not this time," she muttered. She pushed the throttle forward, climbing steadily, threading the plane through the clouds with the skill of someone who had spent her life mastering flight. Lightning illuminated the cockpit, momentarily revealing the determined set of her jaw, the icy focus in her eyes. Sweat glistened on her brow, but she did not falter. Every adjustment was precise, every maneuver deliberate. The plane began to stabilize, the descent arrested, the passengers unaware of the fine balance between survival and catastrophe. She keyed the radio again, voice firm, carrying authority. "Attention all aircraft, I am in command. Maintain safe distance. Flight 227 is under control. Passengers are safe." Silence, then static, then the faint, incredulous acknowledgement of the controllers. "Understood, Night Sparrow. Proceed with caution." Anna exhaled just slightly, though the tension still gripped her chest. They were not out of danger, not by a long shot. The storm ahead, the limited fuel, the military interceptors, the storm of her past catching up, all of it was still looming. She glanced at the captain, still unconscious. She adjusted his seat, checked his oxygen, ensuring he would survive until help arrived. Her instincts, sharpened by decades of secret missions, guided her every move. The passengers began murmuring, noticing a subtle stabilization in the plane's movement. Whispers of relief passed through the cabin, though fear remained etched on every face. Anna felt a surge of determination. She could save them. She had to save them. Then over the radio, a voice cut in sharp and urgent. "Flight 227, this is military control. We are sending interceptors. Stand by for instructions. Your identity classified. Confirm your call sign." Anna's pulse quickened. Recognition. Danger. Her past had collided with the present in a way she could never have predicted. But she had one advantage: skill, experience, instinct. She would navigate through this storm, both literal and figurative. Her fingers tightened on the yoke. The plane leveled, alarms still blaring, engines humming with strain. She knew the next moments would define everything, not just for her, but for every soul on board. Outside, the night sky was vast, dark, and merciless. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the wings, the clouds, the storm ahead. Anna's mind sharpened. Every decision, every movement, every breath mattered. The passengers, still unaware of her identity, began to trust, instinctively, that the woman who had taken control was their only hope, and she would not fail them. Anna Fletcher, the classified ghost of 1983, was back in control, and the world would soon remember why. The cockpit lights flickered against the darkness outside as Anna Fletcher fought to maintain control. Flight 227 shuddered under the weight of turbulence, yet she guided it steadily, her hands moving with surgical precision over the yoke. Every instrument was screaming, every gauge a potential hazard. The plane wasn't just a machine, it was a living challenge, a beast that demanded respect, skill, and nerve. The intercom crackled with an authoritative voice, sharp and cold. "Flight 227, this is Central Command. Identify yourself immediately. Confirm call sign. You are in restricted airspace. Lethal force is authorized if you do not comply." Anna's jaw tightened. Recognition. They knew her. 42 years of disappearance, of erasure, had ended with a single radio call. The voice belonged to a general she once knew, a man who had ordered her to vanish all those decades ago. A man who had made her a ghost, a phantom erased from every record, and yet he now demanded compliance. Her pulse raced. Behind her, the captain remained unconscious, breathing shallow life tethered precariously to functioning systems. The first officer was still out cold. The passengers, unaware of the political and military storm her name invoked, clutched their seats, faces pale and wide-eyed. Anna adjusted the throttle, increasing altitude slightly to counter the turbulence, her eyes flicking to the radar screen. Two blips appeared, fast-moving, aggressive. F-22 interceptors. The military had arrived not to assist but to ensure her compliance or to end her life. She muttered under her breath, cold steel lacing her words. Not this time. Her mind raced. She had trained for combat air scenarios, evasion maneuvers, and hostile engagements, but never inside a civilian aircraft, never with innocent lives in the balance. One wrong move and the plane could break apart. One wrong calculation and hundreds of lives would vanish into the night. Outside, the night sky was a canvas of black streaked with clouds illuminated sporadically by lightning. The F-22s sliced through the clouds, precise and deadly, their radar locking onto her position. The military wanted compliance, and they had the means to enforce it. Anna keyed the radio again, her voice calm, controlled, carrying authority that seemed impossible in her situation. This is Flight 227. I am the captain. Passengers are safe. You will not harm them. Static hissed through the headset. Then, the familiar voice of the general boomed, laced with disbelief and fury. Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow, you are to comply immediately. Divert over the Atlantic. Failure to comply will result in lethal engagement. Her blood ran cold, but her resolve hardened. Atlantic waters meant a death sentence. Diversion orders were a trap, a final effort to erase her completely. She had survived once. She would survive again, not by surrendering but by taking control of the situation. She adjusted the plane's heading, skimming clouds with expert precision, threading the aircraft through turbulence that would terrify even seasoned pilots. The F-22s followed aggressively, each pass close enough to make the passengers gasp, the aerodynamic pressure rippling across the fuselage. Anna's eyes flicked to the cabin. Faces pressed against windows, hands gripping armrests, eyes wide with fear. Mothers clutched children. Fathers whispered frantic prayers. Every soul aboard now depended on her choices. The weight was almost physical, a pressure in her chest she could not shake. She keyed the intercom, her voice firm. Remain calm. I am in command. Trust me, and no one will be harmed. The passengers murmured nervously, a fragile calm settling across the cabin. But it was temporary. They had no idea what forces hovered behind the clouds, tracking them, waiting for a mistake. Anna's mind flicked back decades to the last mission she had flown, the one that had ended in her disappearance. A top-secret flight, hostile territory, orders that should have ended in death, and a choice she had made to survive at all costs. She had lived in shadows, in whispers, erased from every system and memory. But the skills, the instincts, the fight, it all remained. Muscle memory pulsed through her like electricity. She was alive, she was capable, and now she was in control. The F-22s adjusted their positions, wings slicing through the air, engines roaring like predators circling prey. One pilot radioed in, disbelief dripping from his voice. Call sign Night Sparrow. Impossible, we thought you were dead. Recognition. The name she thought she had left behind decades ago had resurfaced. The very pilots who once trained under her commands, or perhaps alongside her, now hunted her as though she were a threat. She pushed the throttle forward slightly, gaining a few hundred feet in altitude, weaving through clouds, her training guiding every movement. Each jolt of turbulence, each groan of the fuselage, each alarm flashing red on the dashboard reminded her of the stakes. Lives were fragile, temporary, but she had the power to protect them. Then came the unexpected, a crackle in her headset, a faint but urgent female voice. Sparrow, it's Falcon. You didn't think I'd let them finish what they started. Her breath caught, Falcon, her wingwoman, thought dead, lost decades ago in the same operation that had erased Anna from the world, and yet here she was guiding another aircraft ready to intervene. Anna's pulse surged, a mix of relief and adrenaline. Falcon's plane appeared briefly on the radar, limping slightly but functional. She was positioning herself to intercept the military jets if necessary. The F-22s were now aware of the new player, adjusting their maneuvers, considering risk. They had orders, but no protocol for unexpected allies appearing in a high-stakes interception. Anna adjusted the heading slightly, using the storm as cover. Lightning streaked across the clouds, illuminating her face in staccato flashes. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharp, her instincts razor-focused. She knew they couldn't shoot without endangering the passengers, but she also knew the general would not hesitate to risk everything to eliminate her. She whispered almost to herself, "We're not going to vanish, not this time." The passengers, oblivious to Falcon's arrival, felt only the turbulence and the fear of imminent danger. Mothers clutched children, some sobbing, others silently praying. The young boy across the aisle stared at her, wide-eyed, not fully understanding, but instinctively trusting the woman now controlling the fate of the plane. The F-22s closed in, engines screaming, the threat palpable, lethal. One came dangerously close, passing mere feet from the fuselage. Sparks of fear ignited through the cabin. Anna adjusted pitch and throttle, avoiding disaster by inches. Every second was a battle of skill and nerve. Then Falcon's voice cut in again, steady and commanding. "Sparrow, brake left on my mark. I'll shield you." Anna glanced at the radar, calculating distances, wind speeds, engine response. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. This was a dance she had trained for decades ago, though never under such circumstances. The storm intensified, wind rattling the fuselage, rain slashing against windows. Lightning struck distant clouds, illuminating the dark expanse like a battlefield. The F-22s followed, aggressive, relentless. Anna's jaw set. The general's orders, the military threat, the storm, the passengers, the pilots, everything converged into a singular point of tension. She was no longer just a ghost from 1983. She was alive, present, and in command. The plane leveled slightly, responding to her adjustments. She keyed the intercom, voice calm and commanding. "Passengers remain seated. Follow instructions. We will land safely, trust me." The passengers murmured, some crying softly, others whispering prayers, hearts racing. But their fear was now tempered by hope. A fragile, tentative hope that the woman in seat 11A, the captain now revealed, could guide them through the storm. Outside, the F-22s maintained formation, engines growling, waiting for any sign of compliance. Anna knew the next moves would determine the outcome, not just of this flight, but perhaps of her life and the lives of everyone she had sworn to protect. She glanced briefly at the captain, still unconscious, then back at the instruments. Every reading mattered. Every adjustment was life or death. The storm was only beginning to show its teeth. And Anna Fletcher, the ghost of 1983, classified, erased, hunted, and now revealed, prepared to face it head-on. The storm wasn't the only threat. The military was closing in. The past had returned, and the skies above were about to erupt into a confrontation that no one aboard would ever forget. The night sky above Flight 227 was a turbulent canvas of darkness and lightning, and the roar of jet engines cut through the storm like knives. Outside the cockpit, two F-22 interceptors sliced through the clouds, their afterburners leaving trails of fire across the sky. The pilots' voices crackled over the radio, sharp and incredulous. "Call sign Night Sparrow impossible, she's alive," one shouted. Recognition and disbelief. The name had not been spoken in decades, and yet it now carried through the high-altitude air like a warning. These pilots had trained alongside her, or perhaps under her command long ago, and the shock in their voices was palpable. They were professionals, lethal, precise, but this was unexpected. Anna's pulse surged. She could feel the F-22's aggression, their attempts to intimidate. One of the jets moved closer, banking dangerously beside the airliner, wings slicing the clouds, engines screaming in warning. The plane shuddered, but Anna's hands were steady, gripping the yoke with the confidence of someone who had survived far worse than this. Her thoughts flicked to the cabin. 300 terrified passengers depended on her. The mother clutching her child, the elderly couple whispering prayers, the young boy who kept looking at her with wide eyes. They were counting on her. And she would not fail. A crackle in the headset interrupted her focus. Falcon's voice, familiar, calm, and deadly, cut through the static. "Sparrow, I'm here. You're not alone. Follow my lead." Anna's heart leapt. Her wingwoman, believed lost forever, had returned. Falcon's old cargo plane appeared on radar, battered but intact, positioning itself strategically between the airliner and the F-22s. She was shielding them, forcing the military jets to reconsider their moves. The first F-22 pilot shouted over the radio, frustration dripping from every word. "Unauthorized aircraft. Clear the airspace immediately." Anna ignored the threat. She had no choice. Following Falcon's lead, she began threading Flight 227 through the storm, using her knowledge of aerodynamics and her fighter pilot instincts. Every adjustment of the yoke, every tweak of the throttle was precise. The plane responded, slowly stabilizing despite turbulence and panic, wings tilting through lightning-lit clouds. The second F-22 pilot tried a different tactic, attempting to cut off her path, forcing Flight 227 toward open Atlantic waters, the diversion the general had ordered. Anna's stomach clenched. The Atlantic meant death. She had no intention of complying. "Falcon, right flank now," she shouted, her voice carrying authority honed over decades. Falcon banked sharply, intercepting the threatening F-22 and forcing it to pull back, narrowly avoiding collision. Anna maneuvered the airliner through a sudden break in the clouds, lightning illuminating her determined face. Her knuckles were white, but her resolve unshakable. In the cabin, passengers were oblivious to the high-level aerial standoff taking place above them. They felt turbulence, the subtle dips and sways, the occasional lurch that sent stomachs into throats. But they did not see the jets slicing through the night, the military tracking their every movement, the calculated risk Anna was taking with each adjustment. She glanced at the captain, still unconscious, still fragile. She reached over to adjust his oxygen mask, ensuring that he would survive until help arrived. Then her eyes flicked to the instruments. Altitude steady, speed slightly high, engine temperatures critical. Every reading mattered. One wrong move, one hesitation, and the passengers, the crew, and she herself could be lost. Another warning light flashed, rapid decompression potential. Anna's pulse quickened. She adjusted the flaps and throttles, stabilizing air pressure inside the cabin. The plane responded just enough to prevent catastrophe. Falcon's voice cut through again, steady and commanding. "Sparrow, dive slightly, turbulence ahead. I'll cover your left flank. Watch the right." Anna obeyed, threading the plane downward through a pocket of turbulent clouds. The F-22s reacted aggressively, banking, adjusting, trying to anticipate her maneuvers. But Flight 227, under Anna's control, moved like a living entity, each tilt of the wings calculated, each throttle adjustment precise. The first F-22 pilot's voice came over the radio again, frustration giving way to panic. "Impossible. She's outmaneuvering us in a commercial airliner." Recognition, realization, fear. Anna had the advantage now, skill and instinct honed in ways these pilots hadn't anticipated. Muscle memory from decades ago guided every decision. Her past was no longer buried. It was alive, flowing through her hands, through her mind, into the aircraft. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating Falcon's plane and the deadly F-22s in brief staccato flashes. Anna ducked instinctively at each flash, guiding Flight 227 through the storm with a combination of fear, calculation, and sheer determination. The cabin shuddered violently as the turbulence intensified. A mother screamed, gripping her child. A young man prayed aloud, eyes squeezed shut. Anna glanced at them briefly, heart heavy but knowing she could not afford distraction. Focus, skill, control, survival. Falcon positioned her aircraft between the F-22s and the airliner once again, forcing them to maintain a cautious distance. Anna's heart surged with a mix of relief and adrenaline. She whispered under her breath, almost in disbelief, "You're alive after all this time." The storm was relentless, the interceptors aggressive, but Anna's confidence grew with every calculated maneuver. She leveled the plane, pushed it slightly higher, and then banked left to avoid a sudden lightning strike illuminating the cloud walls ahead. One F-22, the more aggressive of the two, tried a risky maneuver cutting dangerously close to the wing. The cabin rocked violently, passengers screaming as seats rattled. Anna countered immediately, tilting the plane, adjusting the throttle, stabilizing the wings with precise movements. The fighter jet overshot, narrowly avoiding collision, forced to reposition. Falcon's voice, calm and commanding, cut through the chaos again. "Sparrow, maintain altitude. We'll guide them away. Keep your eyes on the cabin. Remember, they can't risk firing with passengers on board." Anna exhaled sharply, a thin veil of relief washing over her. They were not out of danger, but the immediate threat had shifted. The F-22 pilots, aware of the risk to innocent lives, were forced to reconsider aggressive engagement. She glanced at the radar. Falcon's plane mirrored her movements, flanking her strategically. The two of them, reunited after decades, coordinated instinctively, using every tactic they had learned in their youth. The F-22s were skilled, lethal, but the element of surprise, the unconventional nature of Flight 227, and Anna's mastery gave them the advantage. Lightning illuminated the cockpit again, revealing her pale, focused face, eyes sharp, muscles tense. Sweat dripped down her temple, but she didn't flinch. Each adjustment, each maneuver was precise, deliberate. She was alive. She was in command. She was more than a ghost. Outside, the storm roared, the F-22s hovered, and the night sky became a battlefield of speed, skill, and survival. Anna knew that the next few minutes would determine the fate of Flight 227, of herself, and of every soul aboard. Then through the static, a voice crackled, "Sparrow, you're not alone. We're with you." It was Falcon, assurance, strategy, hope. Anna's fingers tightened on the yoke. The plane leveled, the storm ahead manageable. The immediate threat of the interceptors diminished, at least temporarily. But she knew the chase was far from over. Above the clouds, between lightning and thunder, a ghost from 1983 was proving she was still alive, still capable, still in control. And she would not allow anyone, military, storm, or circumstance, to take that away. The passengers, unaware of the high-level standoff above them, only felt the turbulence and the lurches of Flight 227. But the air was charged with suspense, a fragile hope tethered to the hands of a woman who had once been erased from history. Anna Fletcher, the Night Sparrow, had taken control, and the chase had only just begun. Anna Fletcher's hands gripped the yoke as Flight 227 cut through the storm, the plane responding to every subtle adjustment with an almost instinctive obedience. Her mind raced, calculating fuel, altitude, speed, and turbulence. The F-22 interceptors followed, but their aggression had waned. Falcon had created a buffer, a shield that forced the military jets to maintain a safe distance. Yet despite the immediate danger subsiding, Anna could feel the weight of something far heavier. The truth. 42 years of buried secrets, erased identities, classified missions. Everything she had endured, hidden from the world, had come crashing back. And it wasn't just her past. The very orders that had erased her were now reaching out like a shadow over Flight 227. The intercom crackled, the captain's voice faint, shaky. He had regained partial consciousness, struggling against the fog of unconsciousness. "Sea Captain, who's flying?" Anna's lips pressed into a thin line. "I am. Rest now, you're going to be fine." Behind her, the storm raged, but she felt a different kind of storm in her chest. Decades of memories, of missions that went wrong, of people lost, of orders she had followed but never questioned until now. She remembered the night in 1983, the covert operation over hostile territory, the explosion that killed her team, and the orders she had received afterward. Disappear. Never return. Forget. She had obeyed, but obedience had a cost. Lives she had tried to save had been lost. Her own identity had been erased. The world had believed she was dead. And now here she was, forced into a cockpit with 300 lives depending on her, and the military circling like predators, ready to strike. Falcon's voice cut through her thoughts, calm and steady. "Sparrow, I've got your 6. We need to talk. After we stabilize, after we land, we can't let them bury the truth again." Anna's pulse quickened. Falcon had been lost in the same operation she thought had claimed her. The realization that her wingwoman had survived, that she had been tracking the military's moves, created a mixture of relief and anxiety. The world they had escaped from decades ago was still alive, still hunting them. The plane shuddered violently as turbulence tore through the clouds. Anna adjusted the yoke, holding steady. The passengers screamed, clinging to their seats, unaware of the deadly cat-and mouse unfolding above them. She glanced at the young boy in row 11, who stared at her wide-eyed, clutching his mother's hand. She forced herself to breathe, to focus. They were counting on her. Another warning light flashed, engine temperature rising dangerously. Anna's mind raced. She had to manage the mechanical strain while maneuvering through the storm and avoiding the interceptors. Every second mattered. She adjusted the throttle, keeping the engines within operational limits while maintaining control. Over the radio, the general's voice boomed, rage and disbelief lacing every word. "Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow, you were never authorized to exist. Comply or risk destruction." Recognition and threat intertwined. The man who had erased her existence was now attempting to end it permanently. She clenched her jaw, fury boiling under the surface. She had survived every order, every betrayal, every attempt to erase her. She would survive this too. Falcon's plane glinted through the lightning, coming in close, then moving to shield the airliner from the interceptors. Her voice was steady, commanding. "Sparrow, listen carefully. We need to get them off your tail long enough to descend safely. They can't risk collateral damage. Use the storm, zigzag, change altitude, force them to follow the turbulence. It's the only way." Anna nodded, almost imperceptibly. She had been trained for such maneuvers, but never in a commercial airliner loaded with passengers. Every adjustment, every tilt of the wings had to be perfect. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the plane could break apart. She leveled the aircraft slightly, gaining control of the descent, then banked sharply left to avoid a sudden pocket of turbulence. The F-22s reacted, banking with her, but the storm masked the airliner's movements, forcing them to proceed cautiously. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the terror and determination etched on her face. In the cabin, passengers felt the turbulence, but Anna's calm voice over the intercom offered reassurance. "Remain seated. We're handling the situation. Trust me." Whispers of hope spread among the passengers, fragile but real. Mothers clutched children, young men whispered prayers, and even the elderly felt the faint pulse of assurance emanating from their mysterious captain. They didn't know who she was, nor the decades of history she carried. They only knew that her presence, her control, meant survival. Anna's mind flicked back to the classified documents, the orders that had made her a ghost. Names she had once trusted, missions she had once flown, all buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and secrecy. But she was alive, and the world would know. She had survived, she had returned, and she would not allow the truth to be hidden again. Falcon's voice interrupted her thoughts. Sparrow, the interceptors are maintaining distance. Use the next window. Descend, slow speed. They won't risk engaging if passengers are visible. Anna's fingers tightened around the yoke. Understood. She began a careful descent, threading Flight 227 through breaks in the storm, adjusting throttle and pitch with precise, confident movements. The engines whined under the strain, but the plane responded. The general's voice boomed again over the radio, fury boiling. Anna Fletcher, compliance now. You will not defy orders. You do not exist. Anna's pulse surged, defiance, fury, survival. She pushed the throttle forward slightly, adjusting wings and flaps, cutting through the turbulence with skill honed over decades. I exist, she whispered under her breath, the words almost a mantra. I exist, I exist, I exist. Outside, the storm raged, lightning illuminating Falcon's plane and the F-22s in staccato flashes. Each movement was critical. Each adjustment could mean life or death. Anna's entire existence, her survival, and the lives of the passengers depended on the precision of her actions. Suddenly, a radar ping alerted her. The interceptors were beginning to reposition, calculating risk, unsure whether to press their attack. Falcon signaled, guiding Anna to an optimal flight path, her strategic positioning forcing hesitation. The momentary advantage gave Anna a chance to stabilize Flight 227, to navigate through the storm and keep the passengers safe. She exhaled just slightly. Not relief, too early for that, but a fleeting acknowledgement of her control over the immediate danger. The storm outside mirrored the storm within her. Decades of suppression, erasure, and betrayal now colliding with the present. Anna glanced at the captain. He stirred, half-conscious, unaware of the magnitude of the threat that had just passed. She adjusted his oxygen, ensured stability, then focused on the instruments again. Altitude steady, speed manageable, engine strain under control, cabin pressure normalizing. Falcon's voice cut in, calm but insistent. Sparrow, once we get below the cloud cover, we'll have a window. They can't engage without visibility. We can land safely, but we need to expose the truth too. The world needs to know what they tried to bury. Anna's heart raced. The truth, the orders, the disappearance, all of it. She had survived. She had returned. And now, finally, she could reclaim her life, reclaim her story, reclaim the world she had been forced to leave behind. The F-22s began to fall back slightly, constrained by the storm and the presence of Falcon. The immediate threat had diminished, but Anna knew the danger was far from over. Every second mattered. Every movement was critical. She glanced at the cabin once more. Faces pale but attentive, hearts racing but alive. Mothers, fathers, children, all depending on her, and she would not fail. Outside, the storm raged, but Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow, classified ghost, defiant, unstoppable, continued her descent toward survival, toward the truth, toward the moment when the world would finally remember her name. And deep inside, she felt it. The storm was far from over, but for the first time in 42 years, she was no longer alone. The storm above began to relent, though the air remained turbulent, and Flight 227 continued its slow descent through jagged clouds. Lightning flashed intermittently, illuminating the cockpit with staccato bursts of white light. Anna Fletcher's hands were steady on the yoke, her eyes darting between instruments and radar, every movement precise, every calculation exact. She was calm, focused, but beneath the surface, a storm of memory and emotion churned. Falcon's plane mirrored her movements, staying close but unobtrusive. They had created a buffer between the airliner and the F-22 interceptors, whose aggression had been momentarily checked by the risk of civilian lives and Falcon's unexpected intervention. The military pilots were professionals, lethal and precise, but Anna knew something they did not. She had flown through far worse conditions under far more impossible circumstances. The intercom crackled, and the first officer's voice was weak but conscious. He had regained enough awareness to speak, though still groggy. "See, Captain, what's happening?" Anna forced a faint smile. "We're going to be okay. Focus on the cabin. Keep passengers calm." She had to keep them unaware of the true scale of the danger. Terror in the cabin would magnify panic, but fear in the cockpit could be deadly. Outside, the F-22s were circling, not attacking, yet. The general's orders were clear: eliminate the rogue pilot if she did not comply. Recognition of her call sign, Night Sparrow, had thrown them into disbelief. She was a ghost, a classified figure they believed dead, and now she was alive, controlling an aircraft with 300 civilians on board. Anna's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of decades-long suppression of her identity and skills. Every instinct honed over years of high-stakes missions surged to the forefront. She adjusted the throttle slightly, climbing through a break in the clouds, lightning illuminating the F-22s like ghostly predators circling prey. Then came the voice she had not heard in decades. The general, angry, incredulous, and commanding. "Anna Fletcher, you were never authorized to exist. Identify yourself immediately, or I will authorize lethal engagement." Recognition, threat, rage. The man who had erased her existence now sought to end it permanently. Anna's jaw tightened. 42 years of erasure, hiding, living as a ghost, and now the past had collided with the present. Falcon's voice cut through, calm but urgent. "Sparrow, they're bluffing. They can't risk civilian casualties. Use the window, I've set a path. Descend carefully, maintain speed, avoid sharp maneuvers. Keep the passengers stable." Anna nodded imperceptibly. The storm was still fierce, but she had regained control. Precision was critical. Every adjustment, every tilt of the wings, every throttle change mattered. She was threading a needle in a storm, but decades of muscle memory guided her movements. In the cabin, passengers felt the turbulence but trusted her voice. Whispers of hope, faint but persistent, filled the space. A mother whispered to her child, "We'll be okay. She knows what she's doing." The boy across the aisle clutched his mother's hand, eyes wide but trust shining in his gaze. Anna adjusted the yoke, descending carefully through the final layer of clouds. Outside, lightning illuminated Falcon's plane, the F-22s, and the storm-tossed night sky. The aerial standoff was about to reach its climax. She glanced at the radar. Falcon's strategic positioning had forced the interceptors into a constrained pattern. They could maintain aggression, but only cautiously. Anna realized the moment of opportunity was now. Descend below the cloud cover, expose Flight 227 visually, and force the military pilots to hold fire. Keying the radio, Anna spoke clearly, firmly, and with authority. "This is Flight 227. I am Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow. I am alive. Passengers are on board. You will not fire. You have no legal or moral right to end this flight." Static hissed, then silence. The general's voice came, controlled but tinged with incredulity. "Night Sparrow, Anna Fletcher, this is impossible. You were declared dead 42 years ago. Confirm identity and mission immediately." Her pulse surged. Recognition, authority. The world she had vanished from decades ago had been forced to acknowledge her existence. But acknowledgement was not enough. She had to survive, protect the passengers, and reclaim her story. "Identity confirmed," Anna said calmly. "I exist. I have flown classified missions. I have survived impossible circumstances. And right now I am in command of Flight 227. The passengers' lives are my responsibility. You will not end them. Understood?" There was silence. Even the F-22 pilots were speechless. Recognition, awe, and disbelief radiated through the static. She had been erased, and yet she stood before them, alive, capable, and in control. Falcon's voice broke through again, softer this time. "Sparrow, we need to get them on the ground. Once below 10,000 feet, the storm will lessen. The path to a safe airport is clear, but we must move quickly." Anna's fingers tightened around the yoke. Descent carefully calculated, speed maintained within safe limits, engines monitored, flaps and throttle adjusted precisely. Every move was deliberate, calculated, and executed with the precision of someone who had mastered life-and-death situations for decades. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the city lights far below, pinpricks of safety in the darkness. The storm was beginning to break. She could feel the plane responding, stabilizing under her control. Over the intercom, Anna spoke to the passengers, her voice calm but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have stabilized the flight. Please remain seated and keep calm. You are safe. We are descending and will land shortly." Whispers of relief passed through the cabin. Mothers clutched children, some still trembling, but hope had replaced sheer panic. The passengers were unaware of the high-stakes drama unfolding above them, but they trusted her. Their lives were tethered to her skill, her authority, her very existence. The F-22s began to fall back slightly, constrained by both the storm and Falcon's strategic maneuvers. Anna realized the immediate threat was diminishing, but she could not allow herself to relax. Every second mattered until Flight 227 touched down safely. Her thoughts flicked to the past again, missions erased, friends lost, orders obeyed without question. But now in the cockpit at 10,000 feet she was reclaiming everything. Her existence, her skill, her authority, her very identity. She had survived attempts to erase her, and she would survive this, not just for herself, but for every soul on board. Falcon's voice cut through again, calm, almost maternal. "Sparrow, visibility is clear. Approach the airport slowly. Interceptors are holding position. You're clear for landing. You've done it." Anna exhaled a small, controlled breath. Relief, yes, but tempered. The flight was not yet over. She adjusted the controls for final approach, her hands steady, her mind razor-sharp. The passengers below were unaware of the storm they had just survived, but she felt their fragile hope anchoring her determination. Lightning flashed one last time, illuminating her face in stark relief. Pale, focused, determined. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, decades of erasure, betrayal, secrecy, and survival now coming to a head. The runway lights appeared through the thinning clouds, bright pins of safety guiding them home. Anna adjusted the descent rate, aligned the plane perfectly, and prepared for the landing that would mark not just survival, but reclamation. The F-22s flanked them one last time, silent now, mere witnesses to the skill, courage, and defiance of a woman the world thought had been erased. Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow, classified ghost, now alive and commanding, guided Flight 227 toward safety, toward the moment when the world would finally acknowledge her existence. And deep inside, she felt it. The truth could no longer be buried. The storm outside and the storm within were aligned. Survival was imminent, and the revelation, the world's reckoning with the orders that had erased her, was at hand. The city lights glimmered through the thinning storm clouds, each pinprick of illumination a beacon of hope for the passengers aboard Flight 227. Anna Fletcher's hands moved with calm precision over the controls, her mind laser-focused on the runway ahead. Every adjustment, throttle, pitch, flaps, rudder, was deliberate, the culmination of decades of experience and instincts honed in extreme circumstances. Falcon flew close, a reassuring presence, guiding the F-22s to maintain formation while keeping the airliner clear. The storm's roar had faded, leaving only the sound of the engines and the tense hum of anticipation. The interceptors held back, silent witnesses to the skill, courage, and authority of the woman they had once believed dead. Anna glanced at the passengers, faces pale but alert, some trembling, others whispering prayers. Mothers held children tightly, fathers gripped armrests, and the young boy in row 11 stared at her with wide, trusting eyes. She allowed herself the faintest nod of reassurance. They didn't know her story, they didn't need to. All that mattered was landing safely. Over the radio, the general's voice crackled, a mixture of fury, disbelief, and reluctant respect. Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow, you have defied orders and survived. Identify your mission. Explain your existence immediately. Recognition and threat intertwined. The man who had once erased her existence was now forced to confront her reality. She exhaled slowly, the weight of decades pressing down, yet clarity surged. 42 years of being a ghost, of vanished missions and classified secrets, had brought her to this moment. "This is Anna Fletcher, call sign Night Sparrow," she responded calmly. "I am alive. I exist. My mission is complete. I am ensuring the safety of the passengers on Flight 227. That is my authority now." Silence crackled over the radio. Even the military pilots trained for extreme scenarios were momentarily stunned. Recognition, awe, and disbelief mingled in the stillness. Anna had survived erasure, concealment, and decades of absence, and she had returned with undeniable proof. 300 lives under her command, saved. Falcon's voice broke through, steady and reassuring. "Sparrow, runway in sight, approach speed stable, descend at standard glide, you've got this." Anna's fingers tightened on the yoke, adjusting the descent rate carefully. The plane's nose dipped slightly, flaps extended, and landing gear deployed. The runway lights grew larger, more distinct, and with each passing second, the world she had been erased from decades ago seemed to come into focus again. Inside the cabin, passengers murmured nervously, unaware of the history unfolding above them. Anna's voice cut through the tension, calm and authoritative. "Remain seated, keep calm, we are on final approach. You will land safely, trust me." A mother whispered to her child, "We'll be okay, she knows what she's doing." The boy squeezed her hand, eyes still fixed on Anna. She allowed herself the tiniest flicker of warmth at their trust. Outside, the F-22s flanked the airliner one last time, maintaining a protective pattern as the plane descended toward the runway. Falcon's presence was subtle but vital, a shadow guiding, shielding, and ensuring that no harm came from above. Anna adjusted the throttle, aligning the plane perfectly with the runway. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Every instrument indicated readiness. Every calculation had been double-checked in milliseconds. She was in command, and the plane obeyed. The wheels touched the runway with precision, the tires screeching lightly as they met asphalt. The cabin lurched slightly, passengers gripping their armrests as relief and disbelief washed over them. Anna carefully applied the brakes, slowing the plane, keeping control. Falcon's plane banked overhead, a silent signal of success. Anna exhaled deeply, allowing herself the briefest moment of relief. They had survived. 300 lives saved. The storm, the threat of interceptors, the decades of secrets, they were all behind her now. The intercom crackled once more, but this time the voice was different. Not the general, not a pilot, but a news broadcast captured by emergency communication channels. Breaking news. Flight 227 has landed safely after a dramatic emergency. Eyewitnesses report an unknown pilot taking control of the aircraft after the crew was incapacitated. The pilot's identity remains classified. Initial reports suggest a connection to decades-old military operations. Anna's eyes flicked to Falcon, who gave a subtle nod. They had done more than survive. They had forced recognition. The world would now have to confront what had been buried. Passengers began to disembark, faces etched with awe and gratitude. Some whispered prayers, others murmured thanks to an unseen savior. Anna remained in the cockpit for a moment, ensuring the captain and first officer were stable. She then stepped onto the tarmac, the cool night air hitting her face. She was alive, visible, and free from decades of erasure. The general arrived shortly after, flanked by military personnel. His expression was unreadable, a mix of fury, astonishment, and reluctant admiration. "Anna Fletcher, you survived. Against every order, against every expectation, you are alive." She met his gaze calmly. "I survived because I had to, because people's lives were at stake. That is why I exist, and that is why I am here now." He remained silent for a moment, the weight of decades of secrecy pressing upon him. Then finally he nodded, a reluctant acknowledgement of truth, recognition, respect. News crews arrived, capturing footage of the mysterious pilot who had saved Flight 227. They did not yet know her full story, nor the decades of missions, the classified disappearances, the secrets she had lived under. But they would, and Anna Fletcher was ready to reclaim it. Falcon landed beside her, their eyes meeting briefly, a silent acknowledgement of survival, reunion, and triumph. Together, they had defied history, defied orders, and rewritten their own destinies. Anna took a deep breath. For 42 years she had been a ghost, a phantom erased from records, erased from memory, erased from life itself. Tonight that ended. She had returned, she had survived, and she had proven her existence and her authority beyond any doubt. The passengers began filing past her, murmuring thanks, shaking her hand, tears in their eyes. Anna offered small nods, faint smiles. She was a savior, but she remained a woman who had lived in shadows too long. This night, however, she stepped into the light. The general approached once more, quieter now, almost human. "Your call sign, Night Sparrow. It carries more weight than I ever realized. You have done what I could not even imagine. You've saved them all." Anna's eyes met his. It wasn't about recognition. It was about survival, mine, theirs, and the truth finally being seen. That's enough. Falcon's plane taxied nearby, and the two women exchanged a brief nod. The world had witnessed only a fragment of what had unfolded in the skis, but for Anna Fletcher, Night Sparrow, it was more than enough. She had reclaimed her life, her name, and her story. As emergency crews escorted passengers safely, Anna stood on the tarmac, the storm finally broken. The city lights twinkled, distant but real, a reminder that the world continued, unaware of the decades-long secrets that had brought her to this moment. She whispered to herself, a vow as much as a declaration. "I am here, I exist, and I will no longer be hidden." And with that, Anna Fletcher, classified ghost, legendary pilot and guardian of lives, walked into the night, finally free from the shadows of 1983, ready to face whatever the world had to offer. The storm had ended, the chase was over, but the story of Night Sparrow Anna Fletcher would be remembered forever. The end.